Give me my phone afterwards, too.
I won't put you on. There's a seat right here if you like.
What's that?
There's a seat right here if you like.
Sure, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to sit there.
There's two right over there.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. This is an amazing celebration for an amazing man in our community, as you can see with the room full of love for you, Dan. But we are thrilled to welcome Dan Gill tonight to read and talk about his book, No More Chairs, with Ariel Exton, who well, I'll read it in the intro, then everyone will know who you are and the importance of you. But I know Dan is well loved and everybody knows him, but like he's got such an amazing background. Dan is much more than an author. He's a legendary educator whose career in Montclair spans over half a century. He was born and raised in New York City, and he graduated from Iona College with a BA in psychology, and then served in Vista and earned his master's in urban education at Columbia University. And since 1970, Dan has taught social studies and civics at Glenfield Middle School, Montclair, where his innovative house system helps foster close-knit, supportive learning communities, and of course, House Gill was the coveted house. But, and we're so thrilled to have him here tonight in conversation with Ariel Exton, who is, she is a longtime publishing insider with decades of experience in the book industry. And she's the co-founder of the Book Doctors, a company dedicated to helping authors navigate the path to publication. And along with her husband and partner, David Henry Sterry, she co-authored The Essential Guide to Getting Your Book Published. And along with her mother, Joanne Exton, she co-authored The Secret Language of Color and What is Color. So Ariel is also an agent at Levine Greenberg Boston Literary Agency, and has helped shape the careers of countless successful authors, including our very own Dan Gill. So let's welcome him.
Dan, I feel very honored to be up here with you because I feel like there are literally hundreds of people out in Montclair who could introduce you, who know you much longer than I do.
There's some people I owe money to.
However, 3 years ago, when we met, this book was in some ways born. So I'm so happy to be here. And just to give you guys a little background, my husband and I do an event called Pitch-a-Palooza, where people get 1 minute to pitch their book ideas to us, and the winner receives an introduction to an agent or editor for their book. And at the Montclair Literary Festival 3 years ago, a man named Dan Gill had signed up to pitch his book. And when I read out the name and he got up and said he was a teacher, my daughter had gone to Glenfield. I knew there was a really famous teacher named Mr. Gill, but I had never seen him because it was COVID when she was there, etc. So I got out my phone while he was pitching and started Googling Dan Gill teacher Montclair.
And while you were Googling, I thought I had already lost.
Yeah. So Dan told me later that he thought I was completely disinterested in his pitch. and instead I was actually in awe of the person who had come up to give the pitch, and of course Dan won. And we did indeed introduce him actually to both an agent and an editor, and the result is no more chairs. It was a rather inauspicious beginning, but things have looked up from there. And now I want to actually delve into the origin story of the story, not the book. And Dan recently wrote an essay for Publishers Weekly, which talked about why he started to tell this story. And it ties in with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So could you share how
Sure.
this came about?
So, as a teacher, you're always looking for connections for your students. And for those of us who are my age and around my age, you knew Martin Luther King. You were around Martin Luther King. You witnessed Martin Luther King. But as my teaching career went along, I always tell people that the reason social studies is hard to teach is because there's 50 more years of history that I have to teach. It's not like finite like math, you know?
Yeah, it's not like you have one grandparent and you remember them once they pass away. You have so many students once they teach.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, what was happening, which is interesting, is that there was a disconnect, I think, on the part of the students about who he was and what he stood for. He was almost becoming like a cartoon character. And so I'm thinking like, okay, how do I connect these kids to the story and also connect it to their own lives? Which is the ultimate thing that you want to do in teaching, is to make young people reflect on who they are and what they're capable of doing and how they become successful at that. So I said, let me think. And then I said, I actually have this birthday story. So it's MLK's birthday. It's my birthday story. It's very similar to the theme of his life. And so I began to tell this story to the class as a way of introducing Martin Luther King to them, and making him more relevant. And the story really was, there's an interesting thing when you tell a story and nobody's listening, there's a buzz. But with this story, and I've told it lots of times now, there's a real sense of reflection. And so that's what you want as a teacher, and I think it really worked. And so what happened was, and the other part of the story is, Frankie Faison's daughter was in my class, and she said, I told my father your story, and he says you need to write it down. I had never written it down when I was here. And so I wrote it down, and then people were using my story in their writing classes in colleges and whatever, which was fine. I thought that's great. And so that's how we got to, okay, I really refined the story in a way that I think it hit its mark and what it was intended to do.
And what's so incredible is meeting people who have had Mr. Gill and also just looking at his Facebook page, is how many people remember this story. And it lives on in the world beyond the classroom. And then when you pitch the story at the literary festival, there was a reporter in the audience and who wrote about you pitching and then about the story, and that went viral. So
I have a funny story about that.
please tell.
I had a student who, kind of liked me. And so it was the 8th grade. And she, first day of 8th grade, and she came up to me and she said, "Mr. Gill." Like one of those things. I said, "Oh boy, I'm already in trouble first day of school." "Mr. Gill, do you know what happened this summer? I went to see my grandpa in North Carolina, and he was reading the newspaper, and he pointed to the newspaper, and he pointed to your picture, and he said, 'Isn't this your teacher?' And she said, 'Mr. Gill, I can never get away from you.'"
So, even though you've been telling the story for many years, I feel like the publication of the book could not come at a better moment in history. It was like the world is just waiting for this story right now. And do you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. So I've gotten a lot of mail from a lot of people who, because it was in the press, and I was on the Kelly Clarkson show, and I was on a whole bunch of other shows and a lot of places, and it's amazing how people can find you. It's kind of scary, but I get this mail, and the reaction of people is so, in a time when you really think things are not really good, and you hear from all of these people who respond to the story, but then they tell you their story. And I think, probably everybody in this audience has a story that they can tell that's very similar to mine in the manner in which in the theme of the story. So one gentleman sent me a heart. He had made the heart in his wood shop, and he put stamps on it. And I got it in my mailbox at school. And he said, "Mr. Gill, you're a hero in Des Moines, Iowa." And I thought, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe you could send something like this in the mail. But then he proceeded on this woodblock to tell me his story about how he marched